What's the difference between the 2008 real estate market and the 2023 real estate market? We always like to look back at history because slowly over time we forget how different things were because it's just a slow difference of changes year after year after year that compile into a look back of 15 years ago to go, holy cow, that is a drastically different market, a drastically different industry, things of that nature. So, you look back in the 70s, they didn't really have as much technology. They weren't using as much computer-based stuff. They didn't have an MLS. They were mostly using, old school catalogs and books. Take us back in history to 2008 and some of the things there and what we're doing in 2023 that's different. So stay tuned. If you want to subscribe to our channel, click on the links below, subscribe. If you want to have a meeting with me and set up some time, here's my Calendly link. Also like our videos, and at the end, we will give you the ability to get our website and download any content that you want that you might find valuable to yourself. So what was different? Well, one, the economic conditions, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not an economist, I don't exactly have the history down, but usually, you'll see 6 to 10 years of a good market and 1 to 2 years of a challenged market, right? Like, those are kind of vague terms, but just understand in the general flow of things, the economics, which the housing industry is a significant component of GDP, just like energy is and things like that. So, we have to look at economic conditions because, typically recessions can be good for economics of the housing industry because generally interest rates fall when there's a recession in play. When the market's really good, we just had a really weird runoff of several years worth of super low interest rates because of COVID and different things like that. That was all kind of fake and inflated, but that's a whole nother political discussion for another time, but it was good for that time being. But back in 2008, it was a big issue around subprime lending, right? And subprime lending caused the crisis because essentially there was not a lot of regulations around who could get a loan, right? And there's even some old politics between, one side trying to let everybody buy a home, and maybe they weren't as qualified, but they obviously wanted to help the impoverished levels or the lower class versus the middle class, right? Be able to qualify for loans. And anyways, that's a whole nother story for another day. But the point being is there was, some money-hungry companies out there too that were charging astronomical interest rates to be able to qualify people to come in. They were making a lot of money off of those. So there's obviously all sides of the spectrum on there. We're having an influence into here. But essentially, you could kind of basically didn't have near the credibility or qualifications necessary back in 2008 to qualify for a mortgage. So obviously what happened is, without doing enough homework or research or having regulations or requirements in place or as tight of it, people were defaulting on their mortgages, right? Recessions hit, people couldn't make payments, they shouldn't have probably been qualified to get a mortgage to begin with, they were much more risky, so on and so forth. So obviously with the Dodd-Frank Act back 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever that was, essentially that put a lot more requirements and restrictions around qualifications to be able to qualify for a mortgage. So that was a big difference. Obviously the interest rates were different back then, although we were probably still talking right around that 5 to 6%, and I think historically that's very normal, right? And if you look over the decades of looking at average numbers of interest rates, 6% is about right. So not a whole lot changed in that capacity. And then obviously we just talked about government policies. Market conditions, real estate market in 2008 was characterized by a high number of foreclosures, short sales, and distressed properties. If I ever pull up a graph and do some of the research that I've looked at, is astronomically higher, and here's why, right? They were letting people in to get loans that weren't really qualified. They were letting people push the boundaries on the upper limits of what they could qualify for. So they were basically stretching their pocketbooks. So the first bump in the road for a potential homeowner that was qualified perhaps for too much money caused them to not be able to make payments. Like, hey, a medical issue or just some outside influence, debt or financial challenge was causing a ripple effect. There wasn't enough of a gap in there on the qualification to determine if somebody could handle a hiccup in their financial life. So market conditions were drastically different back then. The real estate market in 2023 obviously has a mix of properties. A lot of people have equity in their homes right now. It could be tough, obviously, if they get laid off and they can't find another job, then you're obviously going to have some potential issues with making their monthly mortgage payment. However, we understand today that people have so much equity in their home that if they have to, they can certainly sell their home cash out before a bank were to be able to take over through a foreclosure process and be able to go be a renter for a couple of years, fix their credit, get a job, and some things like that. So I feel like we're in a much better situation today for the people that make the right choices. Where it could be a little bit challenged is a year or two ago when the market was so hot and inventory was so low, and it still continues to be low nationwide, is buyers were having to do multiple offers. They were having to give perhaps overvalued offers on a house to be able to get in. If that happens and within a year of doing that, they lose their job and they've got to sell, they may not have the equity in the house at that juncture. But if you've had a house over a handful of years, you probably have the equity in your house to be able to get out from underneath it if you need to. Possibly could even do a HELOC or a line of credit if needed to, but if you've lost your job and some things like that, it would probably be a little difficult to qualify with a bank on that. What's different between 2008 and 2023 as well as technology? Like Zillow and all that was just barely a player into the industry by then. They're a significant player right now. You have some other companies that have come into the more prominent role, if you will, like a Redfin, which is more like a flat fee type service, right? A lot of technology has changed. You have like big companies, KW, like 7 or 8 years ago said we're going to become a technology company number one and a real estate company number two. They are all in on technology, developing and designing various pieces because they really want to see an ecosystem is what I believe we're missing too, is like, how do I put somebody into a bubble where we have a title company, a mortgage company, a real estate agent company, so on and so forth. That would streamline the process and make this sometimes difficult flow of the process of raising your hand to become a buyer and actually getting to the closing table. There's a lot of different challenges in there. There's a lot of different hands in the pot. So I'm a big advocate of that. Challenges, obviously, sometimes people can do unscrupulous things. They can have inappropriate business partnerships that's not advantageous to the client. So you obviously have a little bit of challenge on both sides. Social media, like Facebook back then was killer, right? It still is today, but we did a lot of marketing on social media. Over a period of time, it's become a little more saturated, but now you have new tools out there with Snap, TikTok, Instagram. The game's always changing, right? Google buys YouTube, if you will, or merges with YouTube. So now you have partnerships within there. So just lots and lots of changes. People are less looking to be sold to today than they were in 2008, right? People are not as tolerant in having conversations with sales pitches. So now it's a lot about relationships, just a whole lot of different things. We do believe technology has made the experience generally more seamless. We're not there yet as an industry, but it's more and more players dump money into as venture capitalists and things like that to create disruption in the industry. I think it's only going to make it better and better for the user experience. The demographics were a lot different. The demographics and buyers, sellers in the real estate market changed, drastically. Millennials may now be more significant demographic. They absolutely are, and their preference or priorities are different from the previous generations, right? We were mostly seeing millennials now who want to have an experience that looks drastically different than like a Gen X or a Gen Y or a Gen Z, because they grew up in a different society. They grew up with different technology. They're more intimate and familiar with, let's say, Snapchat or TikTok than they are with Facebook, right? Facebook tends to be a 40-year-old and older type technology for people that are using it. So just really understanding your demographics and how you target market them, and how they want to be communicated with. They may not want to be phone called, right, like maybe a Gen Xer would. They want to just be able to be texted and not be bothered through a long 10-minute phone call that can be done through a handful of text messages. They definitely are more tech savvy, I would say, so they're more into using those tools. They may have also, because of COVID and everything else, kind of put their buying needs on hold during that time because they were going through a different time of their life. They were younger. And then you throw in the fact that right now housing prices continue to go up because of low inventory. So as first-time home buyers, right, that market is substantially higher than what it would have been in 2008 for the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z type buyers. Regulations, the industry's seen changes in regulations over the years, which it conducts business. We talked about that earlier, like Tay in another video. 2000, actually it was in this video, but it was 2008, you could basically sneeze and get a fog of mirror and get a loan qualification. It's much more strict, much more tighter now. As we went through COVID, that changed some of the rules. Now that we're out of COVID, there's not as much money being printed helping people out. So there's a lot of just economical changes. So hopefully you found that helpful to see the 2008 kind of version versus the 2023. Over 15 years, a lot's changed. I think a lot for the good. Perhaps some things could be questioned as to were they the right calls, but that's always debatable for history. So anyways, I hope you found that helpful, and if you like this video or anything, check it and subscribe to us, and put some comments down below. You can also hit me on my Calendly link and we can schedule some time to talk. So thanks, bye.